So I'm joined today by Cara Athmann from Cardinal Group, and she is the Chief Operations Officer. Cara, thanks so much for sitting down with me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Joe. Appreciate it.
So let's start with what is Cardinal Group?
Cardinal Group Companies is a fully vertically integrated real estate investment company. So we purchase and manage multifamily housing. So a lot of student housing, we have conventional housing as well as affordable housing as well. So really all that goes into being able to operate those properties across the country.
Excellent. So what would you say is, as a Chief Operations Officer, what first got you interested in technology and really the implementation side of technology?
Yeah, so technology for me, I mean, it was really just right out of college. I would say, to be quite honest, it was a bit haphazard. I kind of fell into technology graduating. I was graduating with a physics degree and didn't really know what I was going to do after college. So just kind of responded to some campus recruiting, fell into it, and then wound up loving it. So my first job out of college was consulting. So they just hire a bunch of college grads, send them through, a couple of weeks of training, and off you go into these big companies, and you're implementing. I just happened to be assigned to Siebel software, which was CRM software. That was really big at the time. And so really just loved the challenge of figuring out how to make the software work to align against the business processes that these companies were trying to implement, and got to learn a ton about totally different industries, different companies, different leadership styles. All along the way, it was always this puzzle of figuring out how to make the software work in the way that the companies needed it. So it's just very fun, really, really interesting work that I did for a number of years. So just fell into that and just loved it. So I've been a part of technology ever since.
So what was your path then into real estate management like you're angled into now?
Yeah, so as I mentioned early in my career, I crossed a variety of industries, and then when I was ready to get off the road, so I was doing the full time road warrior thing, and started looking in Denver, Colorado for companies that I might want to join. Aimco Real Estate Investment Trust, that's headquartered here in Denver, was hiring, and so wound up falling into that company and just loved it. Great opportunity to not only still be very much on the technology side, but the biggest difference for me going from consulting to an industry company is you got to see more of the outcomes of the decisions that you made and the implementations that you had. So great experience, great team, great people out there. And so that was my first foray into the real estate investment, property management side of the business. So did a ton of work on, with the operations groups during that time of my career at Aimco. So that was my first foray into it.
Excellent. So what would you say? So let's get into kind of the industry today and how you view it. What is your take on how you view the future of operations and kind of how that guides your work today?
Yeah, so I'd say, this really falls into kind of how I got to my role as well. So our CEO, his perspective was the future of operations has a huge component of technology blended with customer experience and how we optimize these business processes to really create these amazing experiences for both our customers as well as our team members. And that was a big part of me and in my role of shifting from being on the technology side for Cardinal Group to the COO role, is to really forwardly lean into that future of really building in the technology at the forefront of what we're doing. So to me, it's just such an exciting time where the technology has advanced to such a degree that it's creating such an optimal experience for customers. The advantages that we all have now for what we can do, sitting on our couch with our mobile phone, just with a few clicks is pretty amazing. So how we design our operations around, those advantages is huge right now. So that's really what we're focused on, is how do we take a step back and take a look at operations and say, okay, instead of just kind of slowly, incrementally improving operations based on the new technology advancements that are available today, how do we just take a step back and say, okay, how do we actually take a fresh cut at this and say, with all the advancements that we have today with technology, with the change in human behavior that we have right now, where, we have team members that don't necessarily want to work from an office every day or be locked to a certain geo, how do we take all that into effect and say, well, how can we design this work that it actually works really well for our residents, it works really well for our clients, and it works well for our team members? And to me, this is a big shift. This is a time right now where there's a bigger pivot. We're always incrementally changing, but right now, given the vast advancements, especially in the artificial intelligence and machine learning side, we're just at a point where we can make bigger steps into this future of how we redesign our operations.
That's an excellent perspective. So then, how is that playing out for you in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, so we spend a ton of time as far as building out the strategy, evaluating different technology that's out there, testing different technology. So what we know is, not everything's going to hit, and that's okay. So making sure that as we evaluate new technology options, that we're being really mindful up front of what does success look like, what's the data that can back up those decisions, and evaluating what's working, what's not. And so we've been on this journey for the certainly Cardinal was on this journey before I got here, but I've been on this journey with Cardinal for the last 4.5 years. And, we've just been very focused on how do we look at technology, probably in two different areas. One is it helps us operate at scale, right? It's really easy to manage, a handful of communities with, a few dozen people and you don't really need a lot of tools. You can walk around, in your gut, everything that's happening, you have it all in your head. You start to get to the scale that we're at now, and it's like, okay, we're looking at technology to help us operate at quality, at scale. That's a huge part of it. But then the other half of it is more on, kind of changing the way that people are working. And that's the whole other area of the transformation that we're focused on of, well, how do we use AI, machine learning tools to interact with our residents so that at 2 a.m., if the resident has a question, that they're able to get their question answered, and just by, texting a number. So to me, it's these two very deliberate paths that we're going down, for one for scale and the other one really for that resident experience and how we enhance and optimize that and create these amazing experiences.
So I think it's an interesting point that you touched on this a little. You touched on this when you were talking about that there, but I mean, how do you define what good looks like?
Yeah, so it really comes down to the resident experience. So, and we use data a lot. So as we're going down some different paths, particularly when it's resident facing, we're very focused on, okay, what is the success rate of the tool? So if we're targeting a certain interaction, or we say success for this particular tool is that it's able to successfully schedule a tour, of the apartment community, then it's okay. Well, let's make sure we're actually looking at the data to make sure it is converting, and that we don't have a lot of people that are frustrated in that process and dropping out of the process. So most of the time, there's great data that you can use to evaluate if something's truly working. I think that's one of the pitfalls of technology projects that we all fall into, where sometimes we just decide we're going down a path and, we define success by getting to the end of that rollout versus evaluating all along the way of, is this working? Is it achieving the objectives that we want? And it's hard. It's really hard to say this isn't working and, feels terrible to pull a project back or a tool back. But at the end of the day, if you keep those success metrics and the resident experience, your team member experience as your due north, then you're able to pull back and make those adjustments as you need.
No, that's an excellent thing that I think people they can get lost in certain things along the way when you're rolling new tools out. With massive technology adoption shifts ongoing, and when you're trying to really overhaul your technology, what do you think is the biggest barrier to achieving that change? And I mean, how do you approach addressing that?
I think right now I'd say there's two. The one fundamental one that will always be true is it is hard for humans to change. It's hard for all of us. I'd say my entire career has been about digital transformation and helping companies change. And yet at the same time, when somebody's trying to change me and I didn't ask for it, it doesn't feel good. So I get it. Like, it is human nature. Nobody likes change that's like foisted upon them. And that's hard. So it is, and it's really hard when you're in the position where you're trying to roll out new projects and you just want to go fast and you don't take the time to bring people along and help them understand the why. Not only understand the why, I think that's one of the biggest parts that we skip over or we take for granted, because we know why in our heads as the people that have spent years developing some strategy, but we don't take the time to bring people along and communicate in different ways so that we know we've reached them. That I think is a huge piece. The other piece is there's always adaptations that you have to make. We never get it exactly right sitting at HQ developing these strategies. So unless we have the right, and again, you have to have the pace built in to where you have the time to gather that feedback and make the adjustments that you need so that you're not creating these barriers for, the people that you're affecting in this change. I think that's a huge piece on the change management side that no matter, we all know it, yet we all very frequently skip those steps or we try to shortcut those steps and we always pay for it in the long run. So there's no question to me that the change management is one of the hardest pieces. The other piece from a technology perspective is sometimes it gets, the technology can get to like 70% of the way there, but what we really need is 80% of the way there. And until you hit that tipping point of, whether it's just not fully integrated or just can't handle kind of like that last little chunk, I think that can be a real challenge too. And I say that with a bit of a caveat there, because I think a lot of times people judge technology of, okay, if our manual process worked 80% of the time, but we're going to hold the technology to 100% or it fails, like that's a trap too. And I don't think that's a great way to look at it. I think you're setting yourself up for failure there. We always should be measuring, is it better than what we can do, manually? But there is still a scenario where sometimes the tech just doesn't reach the tipping point where it needs to, and sometimes we try to force it through. So I think those are the two big areas of, does it cross over to that tipping point of where it truly is valuable, and the change management is just always a tremendous barrier to anything that we're trying to do.
Oh, it's an excellent point. With a role like this, like with that the role that you have, I have to imagine that the technology that you all are using varies really, really widely depending on the business function. So, how do you approach kind of addressing that challenge, and what you prioritize internally to make sure that everybody's able to operate how they want to operate?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. When you think about the number of applications we're asking our team members to work within and be comfortable with, and the different user experiences that they have, good grief, like it's pretty daunting. And so that is a really interesting challenge, because to some degree everybody comes back to, okay, well, but there's no training on your mobile phone and people figure out those apps. Those are typically very isolated, singular workflows that are designed to be very easy. What we're trying to do from a business perspective is inherently more complex. So one way that we've tried to tackle this is by using technology. So, if you look at the old way of training, it's like, okay, great, we're rolling out new technology. Here's an hour-long training. Used to be in person. Now most of it's virtual. You can guarantee people are multitasking during that training. And then they don't use that technology for another month until, they're ready to use it, or a workflow that doesn't happen until they're hiring, which maybe that's not for 4 months. So, I think that model in and of itself is pretty challenging and not very well aligned to how people actually learn. So we're actually using a new technology that's embedded within the software that we're using. So it's kind of in the flow of work, so that we can give more, really, as they're working through something and they hit a snag, they can get that live on demand little snippet of information that they need. So that for us has been a bit of a game changer to help us just get our team members to understand and just reduce the friction as they're trying to learn new software or they have an infrequent workflow. So that for us has been a huge, huge advantage in being able to do that. So a great partner that we've been working with Speckit in order to do that, which I think is using tech to solve our tech challenges. But we've had great results.
No, that's excellent. What do you think about, especially as the needs of your internal staff and your resident experience? I imagine you want to reduce friction and make sure everything runs as smoothly as possible there, but there's some kind of counter interest maybe sometimes with those things. How do you go about making sure that you're collecting feedback internally and tying those to the markers of success externally too with the resident experience?
Yeah, so we use data quite a bit. So we love to use the external data that we get. So we're very attuned to our online reputation. So and we survey our residents as well. So we try to get that real feedback. So you're getting the real feedback at that point, but you also know, what are the renewal percentages for us, right? We're leasing apartments. So no better indicator of people's happiness of whether or not they're renewing. So we have a lot of good data to tell us on the resident side how we're doing. From the team member side, same thing. We survey our internal teams twice a year. We use Qualtrics engagement scores. So that's something that we take very seriously too. And the interesting thing is a lot of times it's great, we rolled out the tech, we have the surveys, we have the data, but then companies don't build in the habits of, okay, well now what do you do with that data? How do you act on that? How do you respond and change the experience? So that's where we spend probably the bulk of the time. I was great, the tech was the easy part, much like a lot of technology. Now it's building the processes of how we build that in, how we understand, how we use those as training and development tools for our leaders of, hey, if we've got, maybe a leader that's not connecting with their team, we can see that in the data, and then we can lead in there and provide some additional support and coaching so that people can continue to grow and develop. And that, yeah, I'd say a heavy reliance on data as it relates to that, especially at our scale at this point. We really rely on the data.
I love that. How do you think that, in what ways do you think that Cardinal is approaching kind of digital transformation differently than a lot of other companies kind of in your same industry?
Yeah, so I'd say that the biggest difference that I see pretty consistently is there's no question that there's operational expense enhancements that are made by leveraging technology, and I'd say when that is your first priority and kind of your only priority, it shows, right? So I think what we're doing here at Cardinal is very much blending in that customer experience as a number one. And by customer experience, like not only our residents, but we're talking about our team members too. So that's very much at the heart of how do we blend these things together, where the technology is giving us this opportunity where we can be more efficient. So in that case, that does help us from an operating expense perspective, which does translate to our clients, bottom lines as well. So we do have advantages that we can gain there, but very focused on making sure that we're creating these, still using the technology to create these really enhanced experiences for our residents as well. Because kind of my whole thought there is you can drain down your operating expenses and get really, really lean, but you do start to degrade the resident experience unless you're very mindful of how does their whole experience translate? What does that look like? So for us, it's that balancing act for both the residents and the team members, and that to me is where I know that in the long run, that will pay off for us as a company as well, rather than just kind of a straight race to just the cost savings. And especially on the team member side, for us, we spend a ton of time, invest a ton of both time and money in our culture and our people, how we're continuing to invest there to develop our people, develop the future leaders of the company. So that, I think, if you don't spend the time there, there's no question but that, you start to see that increased turnover and you just lose great people. And no matter what we do from a technology perspective, we're always going to need great high performing people. And so that's where I think a lot of companies miss, is they kind of lose focus there. And that's where Cardinal is always at its root, has always focused and will continue to focus of. The jobs are always going to change, but we're going to invest in our people so that they feel like they understand their path. They're building new skills for themselves that they can take as part of their career path, and that they've got hopefully a long tenure with us as well, that they can use those skills.
That's a really brilliant point. You love to hear that. What do you think? What is something in the last few years? What is something that you've learned that if you could go back and handle kind of this overall process a little differently, what's something you would change?
Oh man, it's probably like every project I'm like, we should have done, but the should have done is like, it's spending more time on the change management communication. No matter what we do, it's like, there's always, there's always more that could have been done there to either ease the transition for the people or ultimately get us to the outcomes faster. But that is the biggest issue there, of like when you see that that's starting to go awry, making sure that you lean in. So certainly there's some initiatives that I've done that I feel like, yep, we totally nailed it. And others where I'm like, we really got trapped into telling ourselves we needed to move fast, and we shortcutted some of that. So that's probably the biggest area that I want to continue to focus on.
I don't think you're alone there. I want to talk a little bit about kind of like the real estate management technology industry at large. What do you think? What's a challenge that you face as someone that's directly focused in real estate tech that you think would surprise other facets of the organization that might not be as embedded as you are?
I think there's been a lot of advancements, but I'd say compared to other industries, we're still pretty far behind. So I think that's the hardest part, where it's like, there's so many great advancements, again, especially on the AI machine learning side. And it's, just chomping at the bit, ready for more of that to come into our space. I think there's been a lot of great advancements, especially on the, on the funding side of, now there's new venture funds that are targeted for prop tech and things like that. I think that's had a tremendous impact, but we're still behind. So I'd love to see continued investment in that area, so that we can build kind of meet the consumer expectations with the tech that we have right now, because there's no question, but everybody's expectations have raised exponentially over the last, however many years since 2008 when the iPhone came out or whatever year it was, that it's really changed expectations, and we're not quite there as far as what's even available on the market, and would love to see us get a lot further along as far as being able to meet those customer expectations.
So something that I think you've talked about kind of throughout this journey, it's really evident that, I mean, you touched on it just now, that a lot of the real estate kind of market is not super mature when it comes to technology and software. And I think I want to ask for some advice for any business leaders that are listening to this, that hear you talking about this and experiencing visibility as an issue, and have folks working manually and spreadsheets and all these different things. And I think it's a common problem that we hear all the time. So what would you recommend to somebody that's looking to take kind of the first steps in technology operations transformation? What would you recommend as a piece of advice for someone that's trying to take the first step to really drag their organization forward in this regard?
I think you've got to start with the business process. I mean, that's always probably most technologists will hammer this point of if you start with technology first, it's helpful to understand what's possible. So it's not like you're not going to see what's out there. But I do think that's a common issue of, starting with technology and kind of building the process around it versus going the other way. So I do think taking a look at the overall process and then looking at and doing some analysis as to where is your biggest bang for the buck. So do you have, for us, right, when I got here, we had people across the organization all in spending thousands of hours. If you multiply it across everybody, manually pulling data from one system, putting it in a spreadsheet, and then people taking it from that spreadsheet into another spreadsheet so we could roll it up and leadership could see it. You look at something like that, that's, sucking tremendous capacity out of the organization. It's important. People needed that data. It was very important data, but there are tools and automations that we can use in order to do that are far more scalable and cost effective than kind of, to be quite honest, somewhat wasting people's time doing that work. So I think that's always a great place to start is, where are you spending a tremendous amount of manual time? Or where are you seeing a ton of issues of like you have a lot of inconsistencies, or maybe it's on the spend management side where you've got people making spending decisions that are uncontrolled, or whatever it is. You've got to look at what's your ROI. So it always comes back to the basics there of, are you looking for great time efficiency? Is there an opportunity from a risk management perspective? So generally there always is. So it's just taking that step back and evaluating what's out there. And then really getting into the technology to see what's possible.
Love your perspective there. What is a common kind of industry practice that you think is totally wrong?
Common industry practice. I mean, I do think there are a lot of operating models that are still based on the model that was built, 20, 30 years ago. So, I mean, when we started, when multifamily housing got into more of like an industry play versus kind of these really small shops, some industry standards were put in place, and we haven't changed that much from a staffing perspective, from an expectations perspective. And I do think this is a big part of what we're focused on right now. That even though certain concepts like centralization aren't new, people have always done that. There's still people are hanging on pretty tight to the ways of old from an operating expectations perspective, staffing model perspective, how we think about that. We're all kind of just sitting in the ways of old, and I think the world has shifted quite a bit around us. So I think that'll be interesting over the next several years to see the companies that lean into the future, what's possible, and who kind of stays with the ways of old.
Really interesting. Sure. What about, we've talked a lot about a lot of different platforms and all the technology things. What is one tool that you use day to day that you absolutely could not work without?
It's got to be our data platform. So just having that quick, like I don't have to ask anybody for how something's performing. I can just click in and see at a glance how we're performing from a KPI perspective. It's got to be our data platform that I'm the most reliant on.
It's a classic COO answer, of course. Got to have the data. So This is one that I always find interesting with kind of technology leaders. I think so much of these transformation projects can feel really daunting and feel like you're constantly kind of spinning your wheels. So what excites you and what keeps you motivated on kind of continuing to push forward these transformation efforts?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, they can be really big, and I think that's the point of chunking these up into different pieces and seeing those wins and those progress points all along the way is what's exciting. To me, I mean, there's no question that the advancements that are available today from a data perspective, the AI, the ML, like that to me is just so exciting because of what it can do. Being able to have natural, have a technology, have a natural language interaction with a resident, answer multiple questions, schedule a tour, follow multiple threads. I think that's just so exciting, and the capabilities there are just going to just continue to enhance everything that we do and take away kind of that entire low level of repetitive work that people do today of answering questions and scheduling tours or whatever they might be doing. All that will just continue to creep up the value chain so that the people that we have, the team members that we have on site, just the value that they're going to be able to create is going to be that much greater because we're pulling off all of that lower level work and leveraging technology for that, all while creating a better, more always on experience for our residents. That to me is just so exciting.
That's excellent. I want to actually follow up. You mentioned your data platform a minute ago. I want to unpack that a little bit. What is contained within that data platform? Is it pulling from multiple places? What is your, explain that to me.
Yeah, so what we've done is we pull in from multiple systems. So yes, we pull out of our core operational systems on the property management side. We pull out our HR system. We pull in some external data. So at a glance, the goal here is that, our on-site team members, as well as our leadership, as well as our clients, everybody has a view into everything, the most important things that are happening from a performance perspective, which is really key. So what we want to do, especially from a client management perspective, is, make sure everybody has that data, that they're not, and that people aren't spending the time just compiling the data, which I think is what happens when you're in a manual reporting environment, that they have the data at their fingertips and that they're able to react more quickly to that and take action on it. So yes, we are pulling from multiple, and we spend a lot of time and energy building out our visualization platform. So it's not just, raw data, that we're putting the data in context. So it's not just, again, more of, you kind of your different levels of reporting there from operational reporting, but this is much more actionable data for our team members and our clients.
Excellent. I appreciate that. So, Cara, this has been a really fun call and engaging interview, and I really appreciate your time spent with me today. I've got two closing questions here, and the first one is a little bit of a quick base tradition that we like to ask whenever anybody new joins the organization, and it is your first car, your first concert, and your first job.
Okay. So my first car was a sweet Dodge Intrepid, so like a real family car, nice burgundy / brownish. Super hot car. So yeah, that was my first car. My first concert, I think this is where it's like a little bit vague. I want to say it was maybe U2 at Madison Square Garden, but like I wouldn't swear by it, but I think so. At some point, I'm going to have to ask my best friend, who I surely went to the concert with, to find out if that truly was the first one. And then lastly, my first job technically would have been like being a nanny, or if that was, kind of the summer job that I had. So yeah, that would probably be my first one.
I think the nanny babysitting angle is one that is a really, really common one that we hear from folks. And then, Cara, finally, where can people follow your work? What about social handles? Any conferences that you lean into, or places that they can find if you're publishing work?
Yeah, so quite a bit on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to find me. So we do quite a bit of the industry conferences that we do. So we're about to head to Student Interface here in Austin next month, and then also we're often at NAA, often at NMHC as another industry kind of organization, as well as they do a number of conferences. So yeah, those will probably be the few that I hit this year.
Perfect. Kara, I can't thank you enough for sitting down with me this morning and have really appreciated your perspective on all of this.
All right, thanks so much.